I dig my hole, you build a wall. I dig my hole, you build a wall.
Hello and welcome to episode 265 of Retro Encounter, RPG Fans Weekly podcast of many topics. I'm Mike Sollosi, and today is the first episode of Supergiant Games Month, in which we are going to record 3 episodes about Supergiant Games' first 3 games. And joining me today for a special Bastion episode is Alana Hagues.
Hello.
And Eva Padilla.
Hey.
Alana, Eva, we're here to talk about Bastion, the 2011 indie RPG from Supergiant Games. A pretty small development team on this one. Supergiant has grown over the years, but I think it was something like 6 or 7 core staff people made this game, and then they brought in other people for things like individual voice and music performances. So this is an indie game, and a really, really good one.
Yeah, a really good one. 7 is right. Yeah, it was essentially 2 employees who worked, a number of employees who work for EA, and they all went off to make this game in I think it was Amir's father's kitchen or something, or their house, and it really is the the groundwork of a now really well regarded studio, and they deserve all the success they've had. But Bastion is a really, really solid game, and I'm sure we're gonna get into that.
Oh, we will. And I mean, we're talking about them as a platonic ideal of an indie studio, and all of the acclaim that they've received. Part of the reason that we decided to have Supergiant Games Month be this month was because a bunch of us are playing their most recent game, Hagues, and enjoying it very much. Well, we're not going to discuss Hagues in this episode. We'll save that for some Game of the Year talk. But it had Supergiant on the brain, and we had this kicking around as an idea, a Supergiant Month, as an idea for a number of years on our sort of big ideas board, and this time that flower is deciding to bloom. So Eva, what are your general thoughts on Supergiant, and what's your background going into Bastion?
Yeah, I adore Supergiant. I really love their kind of design sensibilities and their art and the music. My background is I first played Bastion about 2.5 years ago, I think. That was my first Supergiant game. And then I played Transistor shortly after that. I really liked Bastion the first time I played it. I loved Transistor. It quickly became a favorite of mine. And then I just got the true ending in Hades about a month and a half ago. Absolutely love that game. The only one I haven't touched yet is Pyre, which we'll be playing later this month. So I'm very excited. I think this is as you mentioned, a platonic ideal of an indie studio. They're great. Love them. Love everything about them, basically.
All right. And Alana, I think you told me before recording, this is your first time playing Bastion.
It is, yeah, and actually this is, other than Hades, this is the first Supergiant game I've beaten. I have played a bit of Transistor before. It didn't click with me, and I cannot put my finger on why. It might have just been like a wrong time, wrong place kind of situation, because I love everything about them. And like Eva, even though I haven't played most of their games before Hades, I love the art style, I love the music, I love the way they tell stories, I love the voice acting, I love everything about them. So when Transistor didn't click for me 5 years ago, I was really frustrated because I was like, why can't you get into this? And then I was really glad that Hades clicked. And when Bastion came out, I think 2011, wasn't it? It was an Xbox Live arcade game. And I remember doing a lot of reading around Supergiant at the time because I just found them really fascinating. And I found it was kind of the time where indie really started to boom, and when digital storefronts really started to take take precedence over, not over physical media, but it was definitely the first time I remember them being really heavily involved in the conversation. But yeah, I'd always been interested in their stuff and always wanted to get into it, and then there was just this barrier, and then Hades has apparently just dismantled that barrier, and now I want to play everything Supergiant. So I'm really, really excited to get through to the rest of the games this month, and yeah, really excited to talk Bastion because it's pretty much all positive, I think.
Oh yeah, no, this is going to be a positively tinged episode, unlike maybe some recent Game Journal episodes. Sorry about that, but before I go into my background with Bastion, I want to hit a point that Alana brought up a moment ago. Digital storefronts and Xbox Live Arcade were perfect timing for Bastion because Bastion came out in 2011, and Steam had been about 7 or 8 years in by then, and Xbox Live Arcade had been maybe 1 or 2 years in by then. But around that era, Xbox Live Arcade did something called Summer of Arcade, where they heavily promoted a couple indie games in like a celebration every year. And I remember that what's that time traveling platformer game?
Braid or
Braid?
yeah,
Braid. Yeah, like Braid really caught on around one of those Summer of Arcade events, and it just seemed like it was XBLA was a bit of a hit maker that helped the indie boom a little bit, and XBLA and Steam being extremely accessible digital storefronts with prices very low and a lot of excitement about Summer of Arcade and big Steam sales made I think really helped indie developers. And the timing for Supergiant to come out with a game in 2011 that's as rock solid as Bastion was, and to be on platforms like I think XBLA originally in 2011 and Steam about a year later, was just, I mean, incredible timing and luck on their point to make this game. Like, I mean, it's a great game, so it deserves to be big. But they really maximized their window for exactly when to land in terms of when digital storefronts were blossoming. And but personally, I have never owned an Xbox, so I played this for the first time on Steam pretty soon after it came out. I built my current desktop PC in 2012, and I was really excitedly getting a bunch of Steam games that I couldn't that couldn't run very well on my school laptop. So I'm pretty sure I played Bastion in 2012 or 2013. I'd have to check my old blog list to find out exactly when, and had a lot of fun with it. Thought it was great. Didn't never really replayed it, but earlier this year there was a Switch sale on Bastion and Transistor. I think Bastion was $3 and Transistor was $4, and I thought to myself, perfect, I'll buy both of them and replay Bastion. So that's exactly what I did. Similar to Alana, I played Transistor also on Steam shortly after it came out, but I only got to maybe the halfway point. I was struggling a little bit with it, and I didn't connect with it the same way I did with Bastion. I ended up beating Transistor for the first time this spring right after playing Bastion. So yeah, I've recently played Bastion and Transistor, and for this podcast, to refresh myself, I didn't replay the whole thing again. I loaded up a new game plus and messed around for the first couple levels again. But it's worth it because this game is fun start to finish. Let's go back to the beginning. In Bastion, you're a character enigmatically called the Kid, and you fall from the sky and land in what appears to be the ruins of your home. And it's unclear what's happening at first. There's a mysterious narrator speaking about your every action, like the kid didn't know what hit him, like if you made, like if you sustained damage or something. And as you walk along the environment reconstitutes around you. Like it seems like it's an empty sky or an empty void, but if you take a few steps forward, the hallway and the doors and the walls and everything just sort of appears like it's a video game loading its environment assets, which is a really cool effect. The narration and the environment being created around you until after you stumble through the first stage, you end up at the Bastion, which is a empty meadow that appears to be a safe space away from whatever happened that made the entire world disappear. So starting with you, Eva, very early impression, like what was going through your head, or at least what was your reaction to the first few stages in Bastion?
Well, the first thing I was thinking of when I was playing this was how beautiful the world is, and especially for an Xbox Live Arcade game. At first, you had a game like Braid looked fine, but the other games that were around that time, I think Castle Crashers and such, they were not really visually rich like this game is. And when you look at the backgrounds and how they work with the music, and you have, as you mentioned, this world kind of forming back together at your feet, it gives this strange sort of sense of power already to the kid as they're walking through this world. It's like the world doesn't exist unless the kid's feet kind of wills it. And that kind of already gives you the sense of power as you're walking through this world. So you think, I'm going to become a character that goes through this world in a very kind of power fantasy way. And that's what you think about it, but it definitely turns out to not be like that, which is something that I think is really impactful about the game.
It gives you the weird feeling of, I'm not sure where the exit to this room is. I better walk around the perimeter until I can find one. and it and it's a visual flair that's at least uncommon. Alana, what were your early impressions of the game? Like, at least to your memory.
Well, very similar, really. Like, I think Gen Z's artwork across all of these games, I'm sure we'll come back to it multiple times. The way she designs worlds and the ways that she, like, creates these areas and the way they unfold as well is just so magical. And, like, yeah, like you say, there's things to come that obviously don't make it seem as wonderful and as like empowering as maybe we thought. But I think in particular, like the first thing, and I knew this going in because like I think it's the thing that Bastion is really famous for. The narrator. Wow, like what an impressive and powerful way to use a storytelling device in such a way that like informative, sometimes funny, and it's just it's very welcoming and he's very charming. Like, you know, you fall off the ledge and he's just like, oh, just kidding, when you reappear back on the like surface. And it feels like everything, like even within like the first 10 to 15 minutes of the game, you can tell that like the way that the pathways are laying out in front of you as you walk around, the way that the narrative or the narration like unfolds as you do things, like you swing your hammer and you break a load of boxes, and the narrator will make a comment about you like being really violent or angry, and you're like, well no, because I'm just getting money out of the boxes, so why, you know, it kind of makes you think about the way you're playing the game as well. But it's just so like the vocals, the voice work, the artwork unfolding, and then even just like the music is a bit dynamic, and Darren Korb does a really, you know, the audio mixing in this game is fantastic as it is, but like the way that it's so dynamic and it changes depending on situation. It just all weaves together, and it like it's like you're right at the beginning of a very big tapestry that's being stitched together as you go. And yeah, I was hooked pretty much from the first line, I would say.
I think it's amazing how Darren Korb puts the music together, because when I kind of look back on it and piece it out into its separate ideas, there's a lot of different genres that are being blended together in this. You have this sort of folksy Americana sound, you have a bit of
Yeah,
kind of, old school rock to it, and a lot of trip hop influence from like late 90s UK and such.
yeah.
And you don't really think about how many disparate elements there are, because it just feels cohesive and it feels so singular.
Definitely, yeah. I know. I remember Eva bringing this up a while ago. It was probably on a different episode. It might have even been on a rhythm episode. But I watched the No Clip documentary for this, and probably will do for all of the other games. And Darren Korb said in that interview, he was like, "I basically had to come up with my own genre." And interestingly enough, like definitely with Hades, and I think with Transistor as well, he gives them like really unusual names. And he hasn't done that with Bastion, but you can definitely tell like that the fusion of all these different styles and genres of music have really informed the world of Bastion, and it really makes it feel like even though it's an isometric top-down action RPG, like I can't think of anything else like it in terms of presentation or sound or style at all.
Okay, so a few follow-up points. First of all, shout out NoClip. NoClip is a video series run by Danny O'Dwyer, who was formerly with GameSpot UK, and occasionally Giant Bomb for many years. Then he left. Then he left that whole CNET family to make video game short form documentaries. Basically, all of which I've seen are great. I think it's maybe the definitive best way to hear the Final Fantasy 14 saga told by an English language organization. Is the No Clip on FF14 I think is required listening for FF14 fans.
Yeah.
But yeah, so No Clip, great stuff. I haven't heard their Supergiant stuff now, but I think I will very soon. And second, back to the narration, it is so crucial to me because it firmly places this game in the third person. The player is not you, the player is the kid. And you're sort of watching something unfold that is out that is sort of out of the like they're putting the pieces back of a puzzle together that was assembled long ago, and you're reassembling it as you go. And it just feels different than an isometric action game where you can see most of the map or the whole map from the beginning. And it's like you're turning the pages of a storybook with this narration and this world creation. And Logan Cunningham as the narrator, whose name is Rux in the when you meet him in the Bastion. He's a
the stranger first, isn't it? You don't find out it's Rux until halfway through. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, he's called the stranger, and then you eventually learn his name is Rux. But he has like a big Wilford Brimley mustache. He's a real rustic looking dude. But Logan Cunningham's narration is so textured and the voice so rich that I would do weird things to find more narration. Whenever you equip a new combination of weapons for the first time, because there's a weapon system in this game, and once you have two, you're allowed to equip two at once. Every time you equip a new combination, he'll give you some comment, and the final two weapons are basically an explosive mortar and an explosive rocket launcher, and he'll just say something like, "Now that's just unnecessary," and and just getting comments like that from motivated me to unlock more of the game, and it's very uncommon for me to. I get weird about voice acting sometimes, but it's weird for me to focus on voice acting as something I wanted to hear more of, so I played more of the game. It's really remarkable. And Logan Cunningham, like Darren Korb, is a bit of a sort of an unofficial Supergiant employee. Both of them, I think, have been involved in every single game in their oeuvre of 4.
Yeah, definitely. They're definitely the most prominent. Well, Logan Cunningham is definitely the most prominent voice. Pretty prominent in Transistor as well, which we'll get to. And obviously in Hades, he is Hades as well as a bunch of other characters. So, and rightfully up for an award for his role in Hades. So, well deserved, I think. After even why was he not up for anything for this? Like, he's incredible. This is his first voice role in a game, as far as I'm aware. To think I
think he was the actor friend of someone else on Supergiant Games.
He was Darren Korb's roommate.
Yeah, that was it. And I guess Korb was like, "Oh, Logan, you'd be perfect for this. Let's record some audio." And it's worked out splendidly ever since. I mean, I haven't played a lot of Pyre, but I think probably Hades is my favorite performance of his, just because they give him so much to do.
Boy.
And but he is spectacular in Bastion, and one of the highlights, I think. But the stage design, art design, audio design in this game is so stunning, and for it to be for you to know it's a small studio and play it on a service like Young Steam or Young XBLA, just I don't know, it just made it seem more impressive.
Yeah, and his role as the narrator, I think we'll get more into it, but it kind of shifts and mutates. Yeah. And it's a very interesting part of the game.
But let's see, where do we want to go next? I mentioned weapons a little bit. As you go forward in the game, the kid and the stranger, later Rux, decide that or at least you learn that some event called the Calamity wiped out almost the entirety of what was a large city, or maybe even a large nation, called Caledonia. And the stranger and the kid decide we should look for more survivors, most of whom have been turned into monsters or sort of turned into ash. And to do that, we should explore more areas outside the Bastion and try to rebuild parts of the world as we seem to be able to do by exploring. So, sort of area by area, you go through new stages and sort of learn a little bit more about the ruins of Caledonia and the Calamity as you progress. And another key aspect of gameplay is weapons. You find, oh shoot, it's either 8 or 10 weapons as you go through the game, and like each time you find a new weapon introduces new gameplay elements. Like the stage where you find a weapon is usually ideally suited for use of that weapon. You can unlock weapon upgrades. There are stages where you can do time trials with each weapon, or like special puzzles with each weapon as you find them, and they encourage you to experiment with different combinations and setups, but other than maybe encouraging you to use the weapon in the stage that you find it. And also, each weapon is, yeah, I should say, was used by a group within Caledonia as as part of their thriving civilization. So when you like the Kale Hammer is your starting weapon, which is a slightly awkward sort of overhead hammer swing, and like we said before, it lets you demolish environmental things like pots and like pots and tables easily. Like as you do the trials with the Kale Hammer or use the Kale Hammer a lot, the narrator will comment about how the Breakers were a guild within Caledonia and sort of what they did and how they used the hammer. And there's like sort of hidden lore with every single weapon, which makes just using each weapon and learning the weapon part of the fun of the game. I don't think of this game as the names of different stages. Like I couldn't tell you the name of a single stage, but even without looking at a list, I could rattle off at least 10 of the weapons, because like for me, playing this game was seeing the cool visual style and narration all around me and getting cool weapons one by one for me to master and figure out and like solve puzzles with. And that's, so this is a very, very indirect rambling way for me to ask you, what was your favorite weapon combination by the, let's say, near the end game? I'm sorry, if you want some time to think, I can go first.
Oh yeah, go for it.
All right. Well, for most of the time after I had sort of figured out this game, both playing it 8 years ago and playing it earlier this year, I liked having something for close range and something for long range. And so like I remember starting off using the bow and the shield a lot, and then swapping out the shield for the shotgun, or I should say the musket. And then for a while it was like the musket plus whatever the newest long range weapon was. And I eventually sort of and even after the end of the game, like you getting the missile launcher and the mortar and a bunch of good long range stuff, I settled on the pike and the carbine as being my two favorites. The pike is a spear that you can either have for a nice close range strong thrust or a throw, and the carbine is a rifle that can that it takes a moment to aim, but has almost unlimited range, and then you can have piercing bullets or ricocheting bullets and or what have you. So I would sort of like carbine everything, but if I got a little bit hassled, I would pike, run away, pike back to the rifle. And yeah, so the carbine and the brusher's pike were my favorite loadout by the end.
Yeah, I also like the pike. I usually like focus on like crit damage with the pike because yeah, that's kind of its purpose really. It will do stacking damage and then will do crits more often than most weapons. I got on more with the ranged weapons than I did with a lot of the close range ones. Like, I don't like the machete or the knife. I found it really, I don't know, I just couldn't gel with it. Like, it was almost like you had to be too close to something. I liked being mid-range, and even the hammer kind of let me be a little bit, like, have a little bit of a distance from the enemy. But, like, every range weapon, like, I found I was fairly good with, apart from the bow, which I really struggled to aim straight. You know, like the trial that you have to do for that one, where it's all of like
you have to the bow will pierce targets. So for the trial for the bow gives you a bunch of targets in a certain layout, and you had to take out all of them in as few shots as possible.
Yeah, I really struggled with that for some reason, and I don't know why. I just really struggled with aiming that, but like all the other range weapons were fine, because like I say, I really liked the I really like the rifle. I found that was really, really good. By the end of the game, though, I was using the mortar, the one that launches the like bomb really far.
Yeah, the arcing shot with the bomb.
Yeah, it was
That's the mortar.
so good. Yeah, like it really, especially in the later stages of the game where you get lots of sequences where these like turrets are on the outside of the path and you can't reach them with anything else, but you want to get rid of them really quickly because they do like homing shots or continuous lasers for like 5 seconds. And rather than stand there and guard the whole time, I would rather just launch off one of those like attacks and then try and run to safety a little bit. But yeah, to be honest, like I didn't do too much experimenting with most of the close range weapons. Like the pike was great, and I don't know whether I don't think you brought it up, but like every weapon has like a unique skill as well that you either obtain when you get the weapon or you can buy it from a lost and found.
Right.
And the pike's special one is where you do a dragoon jump basically, and you do so much damage with it. So I really like using that. But yeah, it was mostly just the pike, and then I kind of rotated between the rifle, the mortar, and the spray gun. I can't remember the specific names of the weapons.
Oh, the bellows,
The bellows, yeah. Oh no,
it's like that's like a short range flamethrower.
oh no, not that. No, the one. I can't remember what it is exactly, but like it's the spread gun. The one if you stand closer to it, like it does more damage. But if you want to do
the musket, the one that's like
the
a
musket,
shotgun.
yes, sorry, yeah.
Okay. And we're talking about upgrades and lost and found and choices. We should mention that there's items that you find called cores, which I think that you find them all as the course of the story goes on. Maybe one or two are optional, but every time you find a core, you are allowed to put a new building in the Bastion, and this ranges from item shops to blacksmiths to a lost and found, which gives you a different selection of weapons. And eventually, by the end game, you have 6 buildings, and then you find a second set of 6 cores called shards to upgrade each building. So there's like a different upgrade paths and choices that you make as you find more cores and spend currency to upgrade your weapons. The best way to get currency is to complete all those weapon challenges that you unlock as you unlock weapons. Again, I think we're going to talk about this in every episode this month, but Bastion does a great job of sort of giving you of like uniting storytelling, gameplay, and environment, where as you use the guns more, you get more storytelling from the narrator and learn more about the environment. And each weapon interacts differently with the environment. As you rebuild the environment, you get more story and see more of old Caledonia, and environments are designed to fit weapons better. And there's storytelling and lore surrounding each stage and each weapon that you get more the more you put in. It's remarkable. And Alana and Eva, I'm sure you can confirm that some of these weapons maybe feel like some weapons in Hades. Like when you're when you're aiming the carbine or the rifle, it's like basically the same. This is a little bit like a bow power shot, or and the Fang repeater, the first ranged weapon you get, like, this is a rail gun, and I think I know about another Supergiant Games rail gun.
Yeah.
So there's a it's not 1-to-1. It's not like the 6 weapons in Hades are lifted from the 12 weapons in Bastion, but you can see, okay, there's some design sensibilities, some programming sensibilities here, that there's a lineage that I enjoyed very much. But Eva, you didn't tell us your favorite loadout. What are the weapons you liked using the most by the near end game?
So when I first played the game, I think my loadout was musket and bow or something. But for this one, once I got carbine and machete fully upgraded, that was all I used. Alana's totally right that the machete has like basically no range, and I wasn't throwing it, but I just went hard on the crits for it. So, anything that my carbine could not touch as a sniper rifle, then I just got in really close and used a machete, because basically in any game that allows me to do some sort of build, I will almost always do like a Dex Thief sort of build. So if my character can just have like very short range daggers that move very fast, I will do that. Basically for anything, including like Souls games and such. So that was the build that I used. But something else with it you had mentioned a couple of times, Sollosi, that it's encouraging, and that's a great word for it, that it encourages you but never forces you into these weapon decisions. It has a level like the level with the like alligators essentially that come up from
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
the floor. And
that's the Pikes level, right?
Yeah.
exactly. And so they're like, hey, here's the pike. And you use the pike for a few minutes, but then they show up with an arsenal where you can change out your weapon so you don't have to be married to that decision, which I really like because it's not just throwing weapons at you that you're never going to use. You're at least going to have to use them for some amount of time just to test them out, but you're not married to them, which is very important in games where, like, as great as Breath of the Wild is, there's just so many weapons that there's just going to be things that you're never going to use, and they're just going to take up inventory space until you get rid of them.
Oh,
So,
I've used this analogy before, but sometimes I like it when a game wants you to use every part of its toolkit, and some Zelda games I think do a terrible job of this, where they'll give you an item that you use in one dungeon and then never use ever again. I think I maybe made fun of Peter once in a different episode. The ball and chain and the spinner in Phantom Hourglass. I'm sorry, Twilight Princess.
Yeah.
Are two items like that. And it's funny, I mentioned that there are weapon upgrades in this game. I think you get 3 weapon upgrades when you first build the blacksmith, and then an extra 2, or maybe it's called the forge, an extra 2 after you upgrade it with a shard. But each upgrade you make a choice, and like I remember both the machete and the pike have a knife throw and a spear throw as sort of their alternate attack, but I almost use them entirely melee, as Eva mentioned her preference with the machete. I think that the pike's upgrades were like half of them were increased damage, increased critical damage, increased critical hit chance, while the other ones were like throw a second spear, the spear throws faster, like things like that. But I obviously went melee every time. I'm a little bit more like Alana. I did not enjoy the machete as much, and once I got a different close range weapon, I went to that instead. And I think maybe it needs some help from upgrades. Like once you get that 4th or 5th upgrade for the war machete, it takes an extra leap. So like the Rusher's Pike gives you like an extra body length or 2 of range, but similarly high damage and high crit rate, but a slower speed. It's like choosing between Raphael and Donatello in Turtles in Time. Everything both of you said was great. The game wants to teach you each of these weapons a little bit, but does not force you into any loadout at any time, and encourages practice and experimentation. That was just so fun. But it's 12 very interesting, very cool weapons, and there's no wrong choice here. Except, I don't know, maybe don't use the Fang repeater by the time you get the dueling pistols or the carbine. Those are just better. They're just better.
They're better versions of it, yeah. And like, it is really interesting that the game does give you it's a manageable amount of choice. Like, you've got you can choose between the weapon upgrades, you can choose what weapons you want, you can have any combination of things, and even as you're rebuilding the Bastion, you can choose what order to have the buildings built in, in stages. So there's a lot of gentle encouragement and choice in the game. And I think that's a foreshadowing to something later on, I suppose. Choice is an important thing, at least in the 2 Supergiant games I've played, and I would imagine at least in Pyre as well, given the nature of it.
Oh, yes. Yeah, but Pyre is very, very choice-driven.
Yeah.
And also, just notes of similarity to future games, one of the shops that you unlock is a potion shop that gives you sort of permanent bonuses. And
it's a distillery, isn't it? Actually, it's alcoholic drinks that you consume to power up. I think that's really cute. Some of the names for those drinks are really amusing.
And also, there's a shrine or a temple where you can put curses on yourself to make the game more difficult, but yield more currency or more items.
Yeah. And then there's an achievement area, isn't there, where you can get extra money for fulfilling goals, kill this enemy this many times with this weapon, or I don't know, pick up a certain number of artifacts or something like that. So yeah, you have to build all of these buildings, but if you want to level up straight away, then you can build the distillery first. But if you want to upgrade your weapons quicker, then you can do that first. It's a really
I
interesting way
wanted to upgrade the weapons first.
Yeah, me too.
I'm very into upgrading weapons in general in video games. There's
Yes.
very few things for me more satisfying than turning my +1 sword into a +2 sword and having it glow slightly different or something.
Yeah.
That's I always enjoy that. But the Bastion giving you so much freedom in customization and allowing you to customize your gameplay experience with things like those potions and those curses again feels a lot like Hades, which Hades does brilliantly, with the different boons and curses and heat that you put on yourself. But I think just goes back to the Supergiant Games design philosophy of giving people a lot of gameplay choice and some story choice, but always rewarding actions and always giving the player goals or things to look forward to. Like it makes accomplishing anything in Bastion or many of their other Supergiant games feel more rewarding because you get story rewards and gameplay awards for time invested or consistently, and it's awesome. Like this is a fun action game that keeps throwing choices and rewards at you that are consistently interesting, and it's awesome. I wish every character action game had that level of fun in the moment to moment gameplay and intrigue in the possibilities of more gameplay. But anyway, let's go back to the game a little bit. After you unlock a few other areas, the kid meets two other residents or I should say survivors of the calamity, a young man named Zulf and a young woman named Zia. And both of them are from the enemies of Caledonians, the Ura. The Ura has survived at least in greater numbers than the Caledonians have, and it's not. And at first, Rux seems to indicate that the Ura might have caused the calamity, but then it becomes very clear that the Caledonians themselves caused the calamity. Zulf leaves the Bastion to defect to the Ura, and in the last few stages of the game, you're fighting against Ura soldiers to sort of confront Zia and Zulf.
Yeah, you pick up a diary, don't you, in one of the stages, and you bring it back, and it's basically the truth. And
right.
I don't know if it's revealed exactly at this point or whether it's later on. It's sort of more complicated because I think this is covered later, or it's covered in one of the areas where you can fight hordes of enemies to find out more about the different characters. Do you know what bits I mean? Like where you smoke the pipe or you go to the cooking pot. Zia's father is called Ven, and he was 50 years after the Ceylondians, or I believe that's how it's pronounced.
I've been saying it the way of the region of Spain.
Oh.
Right.
Yeah.
Giving it the Van Morrison treatment.
Yes. So it's like years and years ago, the Ura and the Ceylondians had a war, and essentially after that war, the Uras were exiled, but a certain number of them were forced to stay in Ceylondia, and that's where Zia was brought up. She was brought up in Ceylondia to her father, who was an Ura, and he was a brilliant scientist, like you said, Sollosi. And he was ordered to create a weapon to prevent another war happening. Essentially, it was like a preventative. Like, it might happen, but just in case, it probably won't happen. Sorry.
Yeah, a bit of a nuclear cold war or a Vegna gun situation.
Oh God, we're going back to that again.
No.
I wasn't there, but I know what I know what it is. They built this preventative weapon, and he found out the secrets, and he didn't want to use it, so he ran away. But then he was forced to come back when he found out that his daughter was held hostage, and then he turned the weapon on Ceylondia and used it, and the weapon is the Calamity. So that's why the Kingdom of Ceylondia is fractured. So it's kind of, and Aurora does do it, but it's at the hand of the Ceylondians, greed, because they were expanding out so much. I believe the war was caused because they were building out railroads over the Auror's territory and forcing them underground and things. So yeah, it's definitely a fault of the Ceylondians, and a lot of Rux's narration in particular, like you can feel that kind of guilt and reflection over what the Ceylondians did. Like he definitely ponders over a lot of it and is very regretful of what happened and wants to try and fix everything. So yeah.
Yeah, it makes it clear that there had been wars with the Aura in the past, and that in modern times, Ceylondia was the oppressor and the aggressor, and not the victim. But sort of from his early narration, you think Rux is, like referring to Ceylondia as a nation that was destroyed, as the victim nation, when really it was sort of their own hubris and and their own actions backfiring on themselves, which is again is not exactly given to you in a single reveal. It's shown sort of more gradually, but by the end, you're sort of fighting with the Aura to sort of have Zulf answer to his betrayal and to bring Zia back, because the kid and Zia kind of have a thing going. I mean, come on, like it's not in text, but they kind of got a thing.
I mean, yeah, it's very quiet though. Like,
Oh yeah.
like you can play the game without even like thinking about that, and
Yeah.
most of the time I did, because it's very light on it, I think.
Oh no, they don't hit you over the head with it, but I think that
yeah, it's not like the end of, it's not like I love you like at the end of the game or something like that. And with Rux, what I really like and what I alluded to is that he basically becomes less reliable of a narrator as the game goes on. So it starts off, and he acting as the narrator, you think he might be omniscient. He's like, well, we're starting the story. We're not starting the story at the beginning, so you're kind of in media res, even though it appears that the kid is starting off by just getting out of a bed. But then as the story comes on, okay, this person isn't just the stranger, like, some sort of, omniscient thing. This is an actual character named Rux. And Rux isn't just telling the story, Rux has an agenda. And then Rux is like, he's kind of giving the kid choices throughout this, but he's not exactly a neutral party. And then as the game goes on and on, his knowledge kind of wanes of the situation that's going on, to the effect that once the Aura start showing up in greater numbers, he just has no idea. He's just talking to Zia.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I hope the kid does whatever, because he doesn't know anymore. He doesn't have that part of the story. And he's not really much of a narrator anymore. He's just a character whose thoughts you're hearing alongside the kid's actions, rather than someone who's actually telling it.
Yeah, and I guess you can tell, like, even from the way that he changes describing the weapons. Like, Sollosi was saying, like, he was saying that the things like the cannon and that were too much, but, like, earlier on you were kind of telling us, like, what each weapon did in not a vague way, but, like, in a way that you could more clearly make sense of what it is, rather than, oh, no, that's really dangerous kind of thing, and then he just goes back to talking to Zia about things. I find that, yeah, I've really noticed, like, I think it's probably when Zulf leaves, isn't it, that he really starts to shift into this kind of, yeah, he's not as omnipotent as you think he is, and yeah, like the emotion pierces through a little bit more, and the choices he kind of drops in, or he hints towards what he wants to do. Like, your goal at the end of the day is supposedly to rebuild the Bastion and to reset everything to a time before the calamity, in the hopes that you'll fix everything. But there are lots of things, and I don't know if you're necessarily supposed to pick up on it on a first playthrough, but there are lots of hints throughout that you're really sure that's going to do anything, because Rux is pretty unsure of that himself throughout, and there are various phrases that he says that, like, oh, hopefully it will fix things, and things like that. So yeah.
Well, let's address it more directly. There's a right at the end of the game, you sort of fight through an Ura city or colony, and eventually you do find Zulf, and you sort of drag him back to the Bastion.
You could also choose not to.
Yes. But there, I mean, if you do choose to bring him back, there's a scene that I think is pretty great of the Ura sort of just acknowledging the kid and just standing aside and letting him walk. And even one Ura tries to step forward and shoot him, but like an Ura next to him like says like sort of shoves him and has him stop attacking the kid. It's kind of hard to describe, but just a moment of like them honoring the kid's struggle in a way that they just sort of part ways and let him slowly walk back to the Bastion.
You think it's going to go all Crisis Core, but it doesn't, basically.
Kind of, yeah. But when you get back to the Bastion, you make sort of a bigger choice than bringing back Zulf or not, which is, do we use our technology here to build a vessel like a some kind of space shuttle to just travel away from the Bastion and try to settle new lands or explore new lands, or do we use the Bastion to reset the world again? But we don't know if that'll prevent the calamity or not. We just know it's a reset button. And I think the ending scenes during the, or I should say the montage of scenes during the end credits will be different depending on your choice. But if you do what I did and play a New Game Plus, some of the narration at the beginning is slightly different.
Oh, okay.
And it's not really that explicit, but I think what they're postulating is whenever you do a new game of this game or even a New Game Plus, that's a previous player hitting the reset button, and it didn't work.
Yeah, exactly. And like it even like I'm assuming the first time you played it, did both of you choose to reset?
I believe I chose to reset many years ago, but this time I chose to press on into the unknown.
I think I reset the first time, and I definitely reset this time. But I did so for different reasons. Because I guess I was viewing it. I guess I was viewing it differently. So when I first played this, 2.5 years ago or something, I saw it kind of as a more personal thing. Like it could be, like sort of individual relationships, like breaking with what exactly Rux wanted. Like restoration was what Rux wanted, and evacuation is what you'd want. And then when I was playing it this time, I kind of saw it in more broad terms. And I guess to put a political stance to it, like reform versus revolution.
Yeah.
In a way. I guess that's just where my brain is now rather than where it was. So I picked restoration because I was thinking, I see that Rux made mistakes and that the Ceylondians made these mistakes, but I have faith that they could do better.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure about that decision now. Like I just made that decision yesterday and I'm kind of thinking about it, and I'm thinking maybe not, because what does Rux actually do in this game tangibly besides narrate your actions and give you a calamity cannon? Like everything wrong that he was a part of, and ostensibly the kid wasn't really a part of, was just kind of like Rux was a part of making that happen. And for the kid, the calamity happened to him. And yet Rux just kind of thrusts all this responsibility on the kid and doesn't really do anything himself. He has this dogma about like the Bastion is going to be everyone's gain. It's not just for me, it's for everyone. And all I can do now is wait for the kid to make his decisions. And I kind of see that as how we are viewing things currently, between like an older generation who is like, okay, this next generation will fix the things that we've done wrong.
Yeah.
And we're just going to be hands off, pass it on, and have them kind of clean up the muck. And that was kind of.
They also sort of insist that the new generation play but they're also reluctant to give up power, and instead of allowing the new generation to make their own choices, they're trying to sort of force them into, if not the same choices, at least the same structure that they lived in, even if that'll just create another cycle of mistakes. And that's more my interpretation. Rux stubbornly is hanging on to the Bastion and stubbornly wants to press the reset button enough times until the calamity won't happen anymore. But I mean, going back to the old that old saying of the definition of insanity, which makes me think of Far Cry 3, which is a very, maybe my favorite shooter of all time. If him pressing the reset button, expecting to eventually fix it, but it's not happening. We don't know how many times the reset button has been pressed. Then when does it start? Does it stop being a good idea?
Right, yeah, and it recontextualizes that first sentence in the game, doesn't it? The first line of narration, which says, "Proper story is supposed to start at the beginning. Ain't so simple with this one." So, like, when you've how many times already has that reset button been pressed? Because it ain't so simple. This is the start of a story, but it's not the start of the story, is it? Like, how many times have we been through this? And I, I did not reset. And I don't know whether it's because I've played so many games where I know the reset the world button never works. It never works.
I played Nier Automata earlier this year. I want the cycle.
Yes.
Breaking the cycle seems like the right choice to me now.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, and I picked up on that everything that Eva said, what has Rux done other than talk us through everything, and then even then he's kind of not doing that anymore, and apart from giving us the canon, and the older to younger generation, why are we trying to fix what's been broken? And I also get the viewpoint or the decision you made, Eva, the first time you played it, because you know what, I probably would have done the same thing. I probably would have been yeah, I believe in these people and I want them to rebuild what they've got. But it's like trying to put for a terrible, really cliche analogy, you're trying to put a square keyhole in a circular hole or something like that. It's not quite gonna work. And so in my head, the only thing I could do was leave and start anew. I mean, obviously there's still New Game Plus, so actually, what does that mean? But yeah, it's really, really interesting how what is such a simple decision has so much weight to it.
Right, and I think it's also I think ethnicity kind of plays an important part in this, because there's the Ceylondians, and then there's this sort of aura ethnic minority group, and it's kind of like the Ceylondians made all of these mistakes, and then they demand of the aura to kind of just be complicit. Let us build a railroad over your lands. We're not going to ask permission for that, but that's just what's going to happen, and hope you don't get mad at us. And then trying to kind of brainwash some of their people, having Ven build this weapon that's probably going to, was supposed to be used to wipe out his people, essentially. Bringing Zia to Ceylondia as an ethnic aura person who is not taught her own language. She can't read the journal that her dad wrote, but Zolf can. And that she was kind of picked on and bullied for her ethnicity in this city.
Right, yeah. And it feels especially because I chose to save Zolf, I didn't feel right going through all of it again either, just because of a lot of the reasons that you said. Why would I want to press the reset button and make them go through all that pain again? Go relive everything when I can take Zolf at the very least and let the aura have what they want, I suppose, and let the Bastion collapse and just go start anew somewhere else.
I think that the first time I played this game, pressing the reset button was an impulse decision. Of course I want to try and rewrite history so this place doesn't get destroyed. But then having thought about the game for years and years, and just having more perspective, made me realize that reset button is perpetuating what might be an endless cycle, and Rux is stubbornly hanging on to that cycle. And I think, having played the game twice and understanding it better now, I think my sympathies are more with Zia and less with Rux. and we need to start something new with Zia. And I chose to depart. I don't know how much there is left to say about Bastion. This game is fascinating from a gameplay perspective. I think maybe the worst thing about Bastion is that sometimes the movement feels clumsy. I'm giving them. I'll give Supergiant a pass for making their first game as a team of as a team in the single digits.
Yeah, right. I don't adore the combat, I must say, but I do love the amount of choice. Like there's a healthy amount for me to experiment with that, at the end of the day, you can only use a skill, roll, and attack, and then attack with a ranged weapon. But at least there's enough choice to make it more varied kind of thing. Like
Yeah,
yeah.
the combat variety is good, and the and parts of encounters are good, but like just sometimes the basics of moving and attacking feel clumsy in a way that I think they've improved over the years. To which point Hades is just runs like a Swiss watch with the combat in that game. You like just Zagreus just feels much faster and more powerful than the kid.
Going into this, when we said we were doing the Supergiant Games Month, I said, I'll play Bastion. That's like a 6-hour game. It'll be cool to see what is still there from the Supergiant formula that I just saw in Hades, and to be sure that there's tons of that. And it's really cool to see just how many of these design elements are still at play 9 years later. But it's also a great game that holds up well and really had me narratively very driven by the narrative and really thinking about things in our world currently that have been on my mind a lot. So it still feels very timely.
Yeah, definitely. And like, yeah, again, to echo both of your thoughts, like it's really, yeah, it's not the first big indie RPG or the first big indie game, but it might be the first to have narrative as maybe its strongest point. Like, I like all the other examples we've given are all like kind of they're not. I don't want to say throwbacks. Coastal Crash is definitely not like a throwback. It's its own kind of thing. Super Meat Boy is like challenging platformer kind of thing that's evolved into its own thing now anyway. And I'm afraid has got a narrative to it, and obviously the ending kind of brings everything to light. But like Bastion prides itself on unfolding in front of your eyes, and it tells a story so confidently, and that I don't think any other indie game had done until that point. So I think that's why it stands out so much to me and probably to a lot of other people. And like, I mean, even with Hades, like I think of Supergiant Games as a studio that and I think this is a criticism that was leveled at them for a while, is like their games always looked good, sounded good, and told really great stories, but their gameplay never matched up to it. The gameplay was always good, but it never matched that quality of like the narrative visual audio thing. But yeah, like it's really remarkable what it does for like 2011. Like, and the fact that there's still nothing else really like Bastion with a narrator who tells everything and everything just pops up as it happens. Like, it's kind of remarkable to me that it didn't kick off a lot anything special, apart from the studio itself, I suppose. But yeah.
Well, the narrator being an element of the game reminds me of a few things, like Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, where
Yes.
it's the conceit of that game is that the prince is telling a story of the princess, of how he appeared at her window, and so like every time you die in the game, you'll get to a game over screen, but then the prince will say, no, that's not exactly how it happened. Let me run it back, and but it's not nearly as present as a consistent disembodied voice the way Rux or the Stranger is in Bastion. Just so many cool ideas and cool elements coming together makes Bastion really special. And even if not every single column in in the grand matrix of scoring it is a 10 out of 10, but it's just an excellent package, an excellent indie game that doesn't overstay its welcome one bit.
No, exactly. And one last point on like the voice lines and stuff. There is one line of dialogue at the end that isn't the narrator. But throughout the game, like the only voice you ever hear is the narrator, and there's no repeated dialogue, and there's 3,000 plus lines of dialogue in that game. Yeah, it's a heck of a thing.
All right, so I think it goes without saying that we all enjoyed this game and have thought about it a lot, just because this is a compelling game that is thought provoking in both the gameplay choices it makes and the story choices it makes and the choices it gives the player. This is just a really, really solid action game / indie RPG that, I don't know, you Facebook commenters can say not an RPG if you want, but you're my least favorite people.
You have levels. This is 100% an RPG.
Mm. Yeah, yep, works for me. 100% an RPG. Alana, you know what is also an RPG?
Where are you going with this?
I'm going that next week we're going to have an episode all about Tales of, which is a series of JRPGs, if there ever was a series of JRPGs. Those games are RPG as hell.
The most JRPG of RPG for sure.
December 1995 is the anniversary of Tales of Fantasia, the very first Tales of game. It was a Japan-only release that eventually got an official release in Game Boy Advance, but because I'm a maniac, I've played it on 3 systems. We're not going to have an episode specifically about Tales of Fantasia, but we are going to have an episode celebrating the Tales of series with a Tales of Fantasy draft, where we have not recorded the episode yet, but a few of us are going to play a game that's a little bit like a fantasy sports snake draft, but with Tales of characters. We did a Final Fantasy draft last year, and we're going to try and recreate that with a new series, and it might get a little weird. I'm looking forward to see how that turns out.
It's going to get really weird.
Excellent. Are you and I going to have to fight over Max is the real question.
I don't want to know. I'm not going to do the voice.
Am I going to have to draft Max in the first round just so I can ensure him on my team? These are the kind of questions that have been bothering me for weeks. But that is going to come to a head next week with the Tales of Fantasy Draft episode. And later this month, you already knew, we're having episodes on Transistor and Pyre. And then for the final Thursday of 2020 is going to be our typical year-end episode. We have not even thought about recording that yet, and it's already daunting just thinking about the entire year all at once. But next year is 2021. My math is not wrong this time. And the first game journal of 2021 will be Baten Kaito's Eternal Wings and Lost Ocean, which was the winner of a public poll that we held a few months ago around the time of episode 250. So this month, Transistor and Pyre. Later in January, Baten Kaitos. And we have some other ideas planned, but they aren't quite nailed down yet. So please listen. Please look forward to it. But if you want to reach out to us more directly than just listening and looking forward to it, you can email retro@rpgfan.com or comment on RPG Fans message boards, our Facebook page, our Instagram, Twitter, Discord, Twitch channel, something streaming almost every day. This is Retro Encounter is one of 4 podcasts in RPG Fan, alongside Random Encounter about randomness, Rhythm Encounter about RPG music, and Phoenix Edge, which is our affiliate podcast that is weekly and mostly focuses on current events. Please listen to Random, Retro, Phoenix, and Rhythm on iTunes or Google Play or Spotify or however you listen to us. Give us feedback, give us clicks, give us listens. All of that is appreciated. But speaking of appreciation, if you want to demonstrate some appreciation to my panelists, how can they reach you individually, starting with you, Eva?
So you can find me on RPG Fan's general social media accounts, and you can find me on my personals as @EvaLise, Twitter, Discord, and Instagram.
And Alana.
My panelists. I'm my own person, thank you very much.
Gosh. I took that possessiveness to heart.
Sorry. Anyway, I'm a lot less vicious than that normally, but if you want to find me on Twitter, I am at Alana Hagues, so come and find me there. I'm also on the RPG Fan Discord. I lurk around a little bit. I am Alana on there, and if you would like to email me, you can at alanah@rpgfan.com.
And I am not my own person. I am your host, I belong to the world, and certainly not myself. But if you want to reach out to me directly, the easiest way is Twitter. I am at the Real Monsoon most of the time, at Evoker for Dogs other times, at Bravely Podcast even additional times, and I'm also Monsoon Mike on RPG Fans Discord. So I think I need to fire up a New Game Plus on Transistor to refamiliarize myself with that game before moving on to my first playthrough of Pyre ever for the new year. I think, Eva, I think you and I will both finish our gaming goals for the year. We're not going to leave anything on the shelf. We're going to roll credits on everything we intend to roll credits on. Does that sound good?
No.
Oh.
It's gonna be rough. I've got 14. I've got Persona 5 Royal.
Oh my
14.
god.
Oh, forget it. Yep, game overboard. I'm sorry. It's done.
Oops.
So is this podcast. Thank you. Good night. And good luck.